Hello and welcome to another episode of Law Talk. Today's episode, we are going to be talking about the Canadian Constitution Act 1867 to 1982. I'm here with my good friend ER, and today we're going to actually go through the Canadian Charter of Rights, the Westminster Act, and we're going to show you guys how the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms is not an act of Parliament, but only an act of UK Parliament. So therefore, it's not valid here in Canada. While I got ER here, I'm going to pull up on my screen the Canadian Constitution Act, and we'll go from there. So here we have the UK version. Did you want to explain the UK version first?
Sure. What we have here over on the left, where my mouse is, where it shows show geographical extent over here under advanced features. So this is Schedule B of the Constitution Act 1982, a UK act in the UK Parliament. And over here it says show geographic extent. It's only the UK where this 1982 Constitution Act is has its power and extent. And as you can see, all of these buttons, it's got UK, UK, UK. It's nowhere is Canada. So the 1982 Constitution Act is only an act of UK Parliament. It's never been enacted in the Canadian Parliament.
Okay, and so how did we kind of come to this conclusion? So it says right here, 31 Victoria C UK, which means that it does have something to do with the UK and not
Canada,
right?
It came from the UK.
Okay, so now we're going to just discuss the roles of Parliament. So what makes up Parliament, which is the Queen, the Queen, the House of Commons, and the Senate,
right.
Which now being the King.
Yeah.
So if you want to run us through that.
Okay, so basically, I'm going to show everybody here how none of the population are taken into account in any of these laws here. So this here is the 1867 Constitution Act. And it says here, it's an act for the Union of Canada, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick, and the government thereof, and for purposes connected therewith. So it also says here that whereas, and this is way back, the provinces of Canada, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick have expressed their desire to be federally united in one dominion under the crown of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland, with a constitution similar in principle to that of the UK. So somehow somebody here said we want it to be part of the UK, which I don't think that anybody would volunteer to be under anybody else. So to me, that's a little suspicious. So let's just go through some of the laws of it, or some of the sections here in the 1867 Constitution Act. So in Section 3, this is all about the Queen. So it shall be lawful for the Queen to declare by proclamation that basically Canada will be one dominion. Section 4, Section 5, Canada is to be divided into the provinces. Section 6, I won't touch, I'm just going to touch on the major parts here. Section 9, the executive government and authority of and over Canada is hereby declared to continue and be vested in the Queen. So this is all about the Queen. Section 10, basically it states that the Governor General will be serving for the Queen in Canada. So the Governor General of Canada is basically the Queen of Canada, or God of Canada. Section 11 defines the Privy Council. And then Section 15, the Command-in-Chief of the Land and Naval Militia and of all the naval and military forces of and in Canada is hereby declared to continue and be vested in the Queen. Section 16, the seat of the government shall be in Ottawa. Okay, so this is all about the Queen. It's nothing about you or I. Section 17 discusses what Parliament is. There shall be one Parliament for Canada consisting of the Queen, an upper house style, the Senate, and the House of Commons. So when we say that Parliament shall ensure the protection of these rights and freedoms in Canada, as in the third sentence of the preamble of the Canadian Bill of Rights, it's the Queen, the Senate, and the House of Commons shall ensure the protection of these rights and freedoms in Canada as per the Canadian Bill of Rights. And that would mean that they shall protect due process, for which due process was violated in this hoax. And I'm going to call it a hoax because we never once got any evidence of anything. And so I'm just going to keep scrolling down. Section 21 defines basically the Senate. And then section 22, it talks about representation of the Senate within different provinces of Canada. And then qualifications for a senator. And maximum number of senators, terms, tenure of place in Senate, retirement, etc. And then it moves on down to the House of Commons. So now the 1867 Constitution Act is defining the House of Commons. 308 members, etc. for Ontario, somebody for Quebec, etc. And summoning for the House of Commons, section 38. Senators not to sit in the House of Commons, electoral districts, section 40, we have electoral district defined as Ontario, Quebec, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, etc. And so what you're seeing here is you're seeing an engineering drawing of a political map of how the Queen has designed Canada, or the Royals have designed Canada, Ontario, Quebec, etc. And as we continue on down, talks about provincial constitutions. So for each province, there shall be an officer styled the Lieutenant Governor, appointed by the Governor General in Council by instrument under the Great Seal of Canada. So again, this engineering drawing of a political map, which is the 1867 Constitution, defines provinces and a Lieutenant Governor basically being the Queen's representative of each province, or basically God of each province. So it talks about the tenure of the Lieutenant Governor, salaries of the Lieutenant Governor, etc. And then it goes about Quebec. And then the legislative power for Ontario, there shall be a legislature for Ontario consisting of the Lieutenant Governor and one house styled the Legislative Assembly of Ontario. You can see how this engineering drawing of a political map defines everything about us, or about them, nothing about us. Here we go, talking about electoral districts, 82 members for Ontario, etc. Then it goes for Quebec. And it just keeps talking about, the different jurisdictions under Canada. Legislative powers. In section 91, number 27 is criminal law. So criminal is a federal thing. And as we see down here in the provincial legislatures, it does have the courts, the administration of the justice. So the provinces administer the criminal courts, but the criminal aspect is a federal matter. And then we get into taxation, education, uniformity of laws for the provinces, pensions, appointment of judges, revenues, taxation, everything, public debts, and on. And I'm just going through this very quickly because it could be a forever thing here. And basically, the point in all of this is that, oh, here we go. So the Constitution Act, which is the engineering drawing for a political map, talks about the electoral districts in Ontario. So we have counties, Prescott, Glengarry, Stormont, Dundas, etc., Halton, Essex, ridings of counties. So some of here, riding of Durham, East Riding of Durham, West Riding of Durham, Northumberland, Wentworth, York, Elgin, Waterloo, Brent, Oxford, Middlesex, cities, parts of cities and towns, West Toronto, East Toronto, Hamilton, Ottawa, Kingston, London, Brockville, Niagara, Cornwall, and other electoral divisions. So everything has been designed top down from the royals or the crown, and it's all about the crown, nothing about you or I. So there's nothing about the population in any of this that basically says that any of them work for us. We get to choose who works for the crown, but that's it. It's got nothing to do with us in any of the statutes under the crown. Okay, so and then after that, it throws in here, and I would say improperly, the Canada Act. This was not put in through an act of parliament. This was just thrown in, and I can't explain how or why, but it has here the Constitution Act 1982, for which if you start reading the footnotes, you'll see that the act, the Constitution Act 1982, with the exception of a certain paragraph, came into force on April 17th, 1982 by proclamation issued by the Queen. Now, a proclamation is not an act of parliament. It was not voted on in Canadian Parliament. And the 1982 Constitution Act is only an act in the UK Parliament. It is not a Canadian act of parliament. So it is only a proclamation, and they stuck it in the 1867 Constitution Act, for which, to me, it should not be there. Okay, Anthony?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. So my whole thing is, how did we get to this? Like, we have the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which, as we just pointed out, it's a proclamation. So if it's a proclamation and it's only good in the UK, let's take a look at that. Actually, why not? This is the British North American Act, Statute of Westminster.
Well, let's go to the Statute of Westminster just for a second here.
Okay,
because
yeah.
There's something really important in here.
Yeah.
And so the thing is that a lot of people say that the Statute of Westminster is what allows everybody to be independent of the crown. And that's not the case at all, because if you just read over here, it's this here paragraph right here. But basically, it says that all the members of the Commonwealth in relation to one another, that any alteration in the law touching the succession to the throne or to the royal style and titles shall hereafter require the assent as well of the parliaments of all of the dominions as the parliament of the United Kingdom. So this to me says you cannot escape the crown unless all the Dominion partners agree that you can escape the crown.
Well, that just tells me that the crown has full power of all the Commonwealth countries.
Yes, that's right. That's what it is, and you can't leave unless everybody allows you to leave.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So in saying that, well, that means that our Constitution is really an act of UK Parliament, right?
It's
essentially
it's the royal family's stuff.
Right.
That would be like you owning people.
Yeah, no, you can't be owning people.
You can't be owning. No, but that's what essentially is. That's trafficking in persons. That's criminal code, section 279.01, bracket 1 of the Canadian Criminal Code.
Right.
Because our movements, etc., are being controlled to our disadvantage.
Right, because I mean, me or you or anybody didn't agree upon any of this, really. This is stuff that was long before my time and long before ER's time here.
And that's a really good point, because so let's just say something was voted on in 1867. That only applies to the people living then, not to the people today, because the people born today never had a say on it.
Right, that makes sense
right?
to me. Yeah, right? Absolutely, that makes sense.
So we would have to vote on it today to accept all of this.
Right. Okay. So moving on. So just so we touched base on the Westminster Act, which pretty much says that any act is pretty much done by UK Parliament. So we're actually going to pull up, I believe, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. As we were just discussed, that it was an act of parliament and it's only valid in the UK. because that's what 109 footnote just was talking about. It's in respect to the Charter of Rights and Freedoms.
It's a proclamation only.
Right.
It's not an act of parliament.
Absolutely. Because what ended up happening to bring in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms? Like, how did that even become a thing?
I don't know. Like,
Um,
I guess they were trying to get something going on here, and it could not be agreed on by everybody here, and so they had to do something, and they just declared a proclamation. The Crown declared a proclamation and never made as an act of parliament.
okay.
So the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms is not an act of Canadian Parliament. It's only an act of UK Parliament, which the geographic extent is only the UK.
Which we showed here.
Right.
It's called, I think it's called the Canada Act on this website.
Yeah.
Canada Act
1982. That's right. And if you go to the other screen, it'll show you the Canada Act.
Right. So I just want to highlight real quick before we go through that. So this is a UK site. This is, again, called the Canada Act. And if we look right here, the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly the same laid out as our Canadian version. Exact same, as you can see. So, and I can show you that here, right? And see exact same layout.
And just go up a little bit.
Yep.
Right there. It's kick up a little bit more.
Yep.
More. Right there. Canada Act.
Canada Act. Yeah.
Okay. And that's from the UK.
Right. Right. As we just showed.
They threw that into the 1867 Constitution Act without an amendment, really.
Okay.
So that should not be there. The Canada Act 1982 should not be in the 1867 Constitution, nor should the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms be within the 1867 Constitution Act, because it's not an act of parliament. It is only a proclamation.
Right. Absolutely. It's only.
And so the Canadian Bill of Rights stands as the Bill of Rights and our fundamental freedoms.
And that's because it was done through an act of parliament,
That's right.
not through proclamation. Right. So in saying that, what ended up happening during the whole, we'll call it C-19. This
Hoax.
Well, I'm not gonna
I call it a
say
hoax.
hoax. I'm not gonna. We gotta be polite for
Mhm.
YouTube, right? So we'll call it the C-19 crisis. So when they declared the emergency, they were doing it on the fundamental rights and freedoms through the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which again actually holds no water, as we just previously showed you. Because again, if you look here, this is UK legislation. Why would it be under UK legislation? That absolutely doesn't make sense.
Right.
Right. So that's like the Constitution Act, same thing. The exact same thing with the Constitution Act is it defines right there, it lays out in the Westminster statute of Westminster that we are still a Commonwealth country. We technically don't really have a constitution that works for us, that allows.
That's right. There is no constitution for the population.
That's right. There is no the constitution for the population. There's a constitution more or less for the governing body of Canada.
The Crown.
The Crown. Which again, so in saying that, in Canada right now, we could potentially make a constitution. It's like,
well, I don't know. What I would say is let's work with the act of parliament that we have, that the police operate by or have to operate with, and that would be the Canadian Bill of Rights. And the Canadian Bill of Rights says you don't lose a freedom without due process. And due process is, let's, for example, I'm going to pick on you. If I wanted to put you in prison for anything, I can't just grab you and just throw you. I have to write up something, get it handed to you. A copy is in the court. You respond with it by paperback to the court. It gets argued in front of a judge. You go, opposing sides go at it and everything else, and then a judge makes a determination based on the evidence presented, a judgment, and then there's a written finding. None of that happened at all with regards to the declaration of emergency,
right,
three
which
times.
we did, which is actually in our first episode. You can go, I'll link that down in the description below. because we do talk about due process. The whole point we're getting at with our Constitution is it doesn't work for us. It doesn't work for us. We got to stop using the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms because, like, we just debunked it right there. It's an act of UK Parliament. So we got to continue using the Canadian Bill of Rights in order to criminalize the Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act, essentially.
And those who invoked it, which would be the Lieutenant Governor of Ontario. The Lieutenant Governors of the provinces are the ones who put populations in lockdown. It was not the feds, it was not Trudeau. It was the Lieutenant Governor of the provinces.
Okay, so I mean, let's even go back to the Constitution Act real quick here, because I want to, we need to show that that Trudeau doesn't actually run anything, because if that's the case, we need to see, we'll show you again here. Just give me 1 second here. There we go. We'll pull it up. So we'll pull up the Constitution Act. And so when we say Parliament, the duties of Parliament, realistically, Jack, what are they? Like, what are the duties of Parliament? Or is it to protect Parliament and the Queen? Or is it more or less to protect the people?
The Parliament protects the Queen.
Parliament protects the Queen.
The royals, the crown. It's all about the crown. It's not about anything else.
Right.
It's all about taxation and resources, etc. It's not about so much providing a lifestyle or securing a lifestyle or securing anything for the population.
Okay, so then if it has nothing to do with the population, then where does that leave us?
Totally unprotected.
Um,
So the only thing that we can do now is we can only use the criminal code against those who are over us as members of Parliament, Queen, Senate, House of Commons, and they have to follow the laws that was set out by the Crown. And the criminal code is a law for the Crown. So declaring an emergency without ever once, still to this day, 3 years now, almost from the first declaration of emergency, we still don't know what the resources, criteria, and circumstances are for declaration of emergency and extension 3 different times. So let me just point out here, I'm just going to read something. Each report on the Ontario's provincial emergency, so there was 3 emergencies, 3 reports. Each report did not divulge the details of the criteria, details of the circumstances, and details of the resources normally available that cannot be relied upon that led to the declaration of emergency and extensions of emergencies, and never disclose which resources or which criteria or circumstances existed in subsection 7.0.1 bracket 3 of the Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act that were satisfied still to this day in writing. We still don't know why they declared an emergency via due process. We know the media said something. I can tell you that there's a ghost down 5 blocks over there. And the media can tell you that there's a ghost over there 5 blocks down. But that's not due process information. That's not disclosure. That's just hearsay or whatever. So the declaration of emergency 3 times, along with each extension and the stay-at-home orders, etc., and all the mandates were never supported with due process information. So we lost the liberty without due process. And I'm going to touch on the Canadian Bill of Rights. The right of the individual to life, liberty, and security of the person and enjoyment of property, and the right not to be deprived thereof except by the due process of law. Okay, we lost freedoms and people died. And if people died when you do something very bad, it becomes culpable homicide as murder, section 229C of the Canadian Criminal Code. So the lieutenant governors of the provinces committed murder. And I'm going to get back onto the Canadian Bill of Rights. In the 3rd sentence, basically it says, I'm being desirous of enshrining these principles and the human rights and fundamental freedoms derived in them in a Bill of Rights, which shall reflect the respect of Parliament for its constitutional authority. So we're just talking about Parliament here. So Parliament shall ensure the protection of these rights and freedoms in Canada. And Parliament did not ensure the protection of these rights and freedoms in Canada. Parliament went way out of their way to violate and assist the violation of the Canadian Bill of Rights.
So is the Bill of Rights actually a part of our Constitution?
No,
No, it's not. So it's a totally
it's an act of
separate,
it's an act of Parliament.
which our Constitution isn't an act of Parliament.
It probably is an act of Parliament. I'm going to assume it's an act of Parliament.
Okay.
Okay.
So the 1867 Constitution is an act of Parliament.
Yeah, I believe so.
Now it actually had to have been an act of UK Parliament before it was an act of Canadian Parliament.
That's right, because everything that comes here is there first.
Right. So is it still like that to this day? Like, are we still like any laws that are passed have to be done by, I guess, royal assent?
I'm not sure at this moment. I've read something that through the proclamation, maybe that we can make our own laws through our own parliament, but I'm not quite sure. Yeah.
But again, that's only through a proclamation. That isn't through an act of parliament saying that we can do that.
That could be the case.
Okay.
So the thing about Parliament shall ensure the protection of these rights and freedoms in Canada. Each lieutenant governor of each province violated due process. Parliament had a duty to protect due process and equality of the law and protection of the law. Now, I think the reason why a person or somebody can go after Trudeau, but not just Trudeau, you can go after Parliament. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said, regardless of the fact that we are attacking your fundamental rights or limiting your fundamental rights, and the charter says that it is wrong, we are still going to go ahead and do it. Okay, so that is a direct action failing to ensure the protections of these rights and freedoms in Canada. And people have died. It becomes murder.
But according to the Constitution, it's not their job to protect our rights and freedoms. Pretty much, it's the
Bill of Rights, the Act of Parliament, the Bill of Rights says that it is their duty, Parliament's duty.
Right. The Bill of Rights does,
the Bill of Rights,
but nowhere else in any of our legislation says
that's right. That's right. So the Bill of Rights is what you have to stand on.
Right. And that's our biggest point is that the charter is no good.
Right. The wording is good, but it's not legal.
Right. It's not. Okay. So it's not legal.
Right.
It's just
some of the wording is good. Like the right to the gaining of a livelihood.
Yeah. I mean,
how can you try to tell a bird to stop trying to get food for itself?
Right.
The same as how can you tell a person to not work to buy food for your children?
Well, that's right.
That is the destruction of an identifiable group, namely those either with mask exemptions or those who are not vaccinated or whatever. So that is genocide, the destruction of an identifiable group in whole or in part. And we've been denied food at grocery stores. And the reason why is because we had exemptions. And so the exemptions were not honored as a violation against bylaw, as well as it's just fundamentally cruel and wrong and genocidal to not allow people to buy food in a grocery store because of mask. And the mask is a very open thing that doesn't stop viruses or anything.
Well, I'm not a virologist, so I don't know. All I'm saying here is that that our Constitution wasn't really built for us. For us.
It was built for the crown. It was built for that family.
And to protect them, like the idea that I'm getting at here, and I think is what happened is they've put this Constitution in to protect themselves against laws that they make, essentially, because we see that a bunch of laws have been broken, and it's all been against us, right? And we've asked for recourse several times with no recourse. And my whole thinking is, well, they're protected by the Constitution. Nobody can really touch these.
No. The criminal code trumps pretty much anything. You cannot legislate into being that it's okay to murder people who wear baseball caps, right?
I guess.
I mean, that would be a criminal code offense, and that'd be outright crazy too. It's a violation of dignity. It's a violation of the Human Rights Code.
Absolutely, it's I guess.
And so it's disobeying a statute, life, liberty, and the security of the person, the Canadian Bill of Rights. So the criminal code is what we need to stand on. The Canadian Criminal Code is our Bill of Rights. The Canadian Criminal Code is our Constitution for the population.
Yeah, essentially.
The Criminal Code is the population's Constitution.
So, so then let's just touch base. What is the duty of the Prime Minister? Like, what is his job?
Okay, well, Parliament shall ensure the protection of these rights and freedoms in Canada. And
right, but if our, like, we just look at the Constitution, right, and we just saw that it's done by governor generals and lieutenant governors. Not once did I hear prime minister.
That's right.
Or not once did I hear premier.
That's right.
So what do these people do?
So like if we just go to the Emergency Management Civil Protection Act.
Okay. And the Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act.
Okay, so the Emergency Management Civil Protection Act, right here in 7.0.1, the lieutenant governor or the premier can invoke an emergency. But if the premier does it, it's only good for 72 hours, and it's in here somewhere. And in here, and I can't find it right offhand, but it's the lieutenant governor who extends the orders. It's the lieutenant governor who can revoke the orders. And it's quite evident in the Reopening Act of Ontario in section 3, 5, and 11. So section 3 basically states that the lieutenant governor of the province of Ontario can extend orders. In section 5, the lieutenant governor can revoke orders. And in section 11, the premier shall report to the public on the emergency. So it's only the lieutenant governor for provincial that can, do these things. The premier reports, and federally, it's the same thing. It's the governor general, and the prime minister is basically a reporter. So the real target of those doing this to the population are the lieutenant governors of each province or the governor general of Canada, who violated criminal code.
Right, which we'll definitely be touching base on that in future videos, because our next topic is actually going to be the Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act. So there you guys have it. That's our Constitution. It doesn't work for us. It has
it's not designed to work for us.
Right.
It's designed to work for the Crown only.
That's right. It's not designed to work for any of us.
Right.
The Charter of Rights and Freedoms is not a part of our Constitution whatsoever. It's only been done through a proclamation, done through the UK Parliament, which had to have been done through the Queen.
Yeah.
From my basic understanding. So we're gonna wrap this up now. I hope you guys learned something. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, comment your questions down below, guys. If you have any questions about anything to do with the Constitution, to do with the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, to do with the Westminster Act, leave your comments down below, and I'll do my best to answer those questions. But for now, take it easy, guys, and have yourselves a great night.